How many of you guys deal with spreadsheets and numbers and lists of things on a regular basis? Most of you. And what do you see when you look at it? Do you see trends and statistics, or do you see a story? And how about an agent for change in that data? We've heard the buzzwords about getting access to meaningful, real use data and getting more of it out there in the world for people to use. But what good is a chart full of numbers if it can't tell a meaningful story? So that's where Zoe comes in. Zoe Warne is the co-founder and director of creative services at the local agency August. And Zoe and her team were able to use data beautifully to not only save schools money, but to teach and grow the next generation of sustainability advocates. But I'll let her tell you that story. So please welcome me in joining Zoe to the stage.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm humbled to actually share the stage with some really amazing speakers today and to be able to talk to you about making data beautiful, which is, I'm going to tell that story through the school's water efficiency program, which is something that August has had the pleasure of being involved with. I might start with a video, which I'm fingers crossed is going to play, which we had a lot of fun making in-house to tell a little bit of the story and try and make that information beautiful for all of you. So if someone can hit play on that, that'd be great.
Water is a precious commodity. How can decision makers save water without requiring large-scale investment in infrastructure? The school's water efficiency program, also known as SWEP, is giving students, teachers and facility managers great information about their water usage. SWEP is designed to support the national curriculum and was tested on real kids in the real world, as well as the business end of town, to check that it works its best for everyone. From Casterton to Malakuta, Mildura to Welshpool, hundreds of thousands of students access SWEP. With everyone working together towards a more sustainable future, it's pretty awesome. Water leaks cost money and use up precious funds. Funds that could buy more computers, equipment, and even building upgrades for schools. SWEP is awesome at identifying water leaks and helping save money. One school found a huge 500 litre an hour leak and fixed it straight away, saving money and water and keeping stress levels down. Since 2012, SWEP schools have discovered nearly 50 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of leaked water, nearly a third of their total water usage, resulting in significant savings. It makes sense to extend these kinds of savings to the wider community. SWEP itself can do more than just save water, by applying it to monitor electricity data as well. Just imagine the savings we can achieve now it's being applied to both. We're just so excited that the SWEP program is helping schools become more sustainable.
So we had a little bit of fun putting that together. So I wanted to actually start by taking you through what the problem was. So the Department of Education are always trying to save money. And in about 2004, they started the school's water efficiency program. And the problem that they were trying to solve was that they had a very clunky way of going in and trying to save water in schools, and that was by sending in plumbers and infrastructure specialists to try and physically detect leaks, because the facility managers were only getting their water bills once every 3 months, kind of like the way that we all do, from their water providers. So what we wanted to do was actually try and change that and actually provide information in a slightly more current format. And so what we did in 2012 was we were presented with the problem of how could we take that information online and make it more accessible for facility managers. And so the way that the program started to roll out in 2012 was that water loggers were applied to school properties, sometimes up to 2 or 3 on a property, because the actual properties themselves are quite large and often straddle 1 or 2 or 3 blocks. And that information was able to be fed through an API and displayed on screen for facility managers to check into. And that was in about 15-minute increments. So certainly very different from them getting that information every 3 months. What that allowed them to do was to be able to detect leaks a lot earlier, because obviously if you've got some water running through the school at 3 a.m. in the morning, unless someone's having a pool party or throwing some water bombs around, there really shouldn't be much water usage happening in a school at 3 a.m. Maybe at 5 a.m. when the sprinklers go on, but it certainly allowed them to detect leaks a lot quicker and start to make some significant savings. Where we kind of things got a little bit interesting though, was that we started to think, what if it wasn't just the facility managers that were able to access this information? What if it was the teachers? What if it was the students in the classroom? And that was really the insight in the school's water efficiency program platform when we took it online. That's what really changed the game for us in the terms of how could we make this information interesting, meaningful and beautiful, potentially for students to connect with. So it totally changed the game. Basically what we ended up with as an early impact was that the entire school became the eyes and ears for sustainable practices. And that was very, very simply achieved by giving the kids access to this information. And I'll take you through the creative approach in terms of how we made it relevant for kids, but we still kept it relevant for facility managers. So, making it beautiful. It was pretty, the sort of platforms that were around in 2012 and even before, and look, to be honest, even now, they're not that kind of sexy. But what we ended up with was something that looked like this, and I'm going to drill down into the detail of how we got there in a moment. But you can see it's got a very organic, human, sort of illustrative style. First of all, we did some research. And in terms of thinking how could we actually represent this data and make it beautiful, when we were doing our research, we came across this pretty fantastic program that ran out of Seattle by Professor Carla Ratti at the MIT Sensible Labs. And what they did, this was actually inspired by the New York City's Green Initiatives program, which was in about 2008, 2009. And Seattle got inspired by what they were doing in New York and decided to run something similar. So I might play this video to give you a bit of an overview of what they did. So that was a huge inspiration for us, seeing something like that, which was representing what was otherwise pretty unsexy data. We're talking about tracking trash and GPS coordinates, and turning it into something really beautiful and meaningful that people could connect with. And more importantly, this was used in their public awareness campaigns and significantly increased the rates of recycling in the city. And they put that down to how they actually represented the data and made it beautiful. So it was a huge inspiration. So on to SWEP. At the end of the day, when we had the insight that we were going to be putting children at the heart of this platform, it really shaped our design approach. And we wanted to go with something, as I said before, that was very much human, very organic, very illustrative, and really approachable. So as I said, some of the existing data platforms, this is how they were spitting out data, and there was absolutely no way that a grade 2 child was going to interact with this and get engaged and inspired. It's pretty gross. And to be honest, a lot of them are still like that. So as I said, we wanted to make it meaningful. So we started off with an approach from the primary school perspective, which is very, very simplified data. So it brings in the water usage, and as you can see, some other information around how many litres are used per person, because one of the things that we also decided to do was make it competitive, because we knew that kids would love to rise to the challenge of trying to beat the school down the road in terms of how much water they were using per person. So they're able to see how many litres per water they're using per head. And also other things like rainfall, which I'll get to in a minute to give them a slightly more holistic approach, but keeping it very, very simple for those primary school students to digest that information. A lot of the teachers started using this in their maths classes, for example, and anecdotally the feedback that we've had from maths teachers has been incredible. So no longer are we having conversations, which I'm probably sure you guys all remember, which is Johnny's got 4 apples in one hand and Sarah's got 10 apples in the other hand. How many apples does, Billy have if he steals both of their lots of apples? They started not to have those conversations, and instead it turned into, how much water did we use in the school yesterday? Can we download those numbers? Great. Okay, why may there have been slightly more usage yesterday? Was it because our sister city from Japan was here with an extra 50 students? Was it because it was a really hot day? And they're starting to have really engaged, meaningful conversations because we've got the data displayed in a way that is really easy for them to consume and understand. When we move on to the secondary school dashboard, we start to bring in electricity, which I'll talk to in a moment, because everybody says water and electricity don't mix, but in SWEP they do. So what the secondary students are able to actually download is a lot more information. They're able to download spreadsheets, they're able to download increments, and also compare month on month, year on year, and they're able to do a lot more in-depth analysis of the data. They're also able to start to have conversations in, for example, their psychology classes, in some of the more senior subjects. They're starting to talk about behavioural change. And again, some of those earlier examples I used where the younger kids are talking about, well, why did we use more water yesterday because it was a hot day, are turning into psychology, classes where they're discussing why people may want to actually change their behaviour, what are the impacts of changing that behaviour on the wider world from a societal perspective as well. One of the other things that we also realised we could flow potentially quite easily into the system was Bureau of Meteorology data. So again, rounding out that experience for them within the platform. So we currently stream in, and I must say it's not very pretty, but we're working on making it prettier, the dam capacities from the Bureau of Meteorology, as well as rainfall and temperature. Now when we move into the facility manager's dashboard, some of the data graphs probably creep back a little bit to some of the stuff that we were seeing before, but one of the things that they've actually said they really enjoy is the fact that it still has this beautiful organic approach, that the actual platform itself is very clean and very nice to use, and the fact that they're able to jump out onto the primary school and secondary school dashboards and download some of the data that the kids are using as a sort of quick and easy report, as well as build their own reports. But overall, they've really responded really, really well to the more organic style and the illustrations that the platform has. So I just wanted to show you a little bit more detail of some of the illustrations. They're really, really beautiful. I wish I could actually zoom in even closer. For the font geeks in the room, we've used Mikado, which is the this font up here on the top right. It's got a very it's almost like a drawn or painted edge, but it's not sort of over the top. We didn't end up doing something like a handwriting style, like using a Mala script for some of the tooltips and help. We actually ended up going quite clean because it was almost overdoing it on the organic approach and the human approach. So we wanted to still have something clean, but still with that human element to it. I think my favourite icon is probably the MCG. But yeah, we had a lot of fun doing those. So in terms of results, I might start by the fact that you can probably see two logos either side of the August logo on the bottom, I think it's the bottom right for you. The United Nations in World Environment Day Awards, we were thrilled to actually win that award towards the end of last year. And the reason I'm talking about that in terms of early results is because of the strength of the auditing that you have to go through when you submit for an awards program like that. So with regards to all of the numbers that I'm talking about, they're very legit. The UN has said that they're legit, so I'm hoping that's all right. Also the Sustainia Awards, which is a sustainable and environmental focused think tank that runs out of Copenhagen. Incidentally, this is weird, but Arnold Schwarzenegger is the chair of Sustainia 100. I don't know how much he knows about the environment given what he did in California, but that's another story. But anyway, they choose the top 100 global environmental and sustainable solutions every year, and we were delighted to have SWEP nominated as one of the 100 top global sustainable solutions out of Sustainia. In terms of where we are, it's in 500 schools at the moment. SWEP is, the online platform is being used by 500 schools across Victoria. And this is in June, I'm talking, by the way. Sorry, just to give it some context for where I'm going to go with this. And at that stage, we had saved about 700 million litres of water, and some lasting behavioural change was sort of being anecdotally fed back, but as the students actually have gone through the program, more and more they're actually feeding in suggestions and resources and tips and things like that to other students, and also taking that home and having conversations with their parents and running around switching off taps and, you know, telling mum not to leave the dishes, you know, not to wash the dishes with the water running and all that sort of stuff. So in terms of where we were before, that was about June last year when we submitted those numbers for those two awards programs. We're really thrilled that we've now been extended out to 1,500 schools. So we're on a recruitment drive at the moment. So anyone with kids going to school, feel free to go to myswep.com.au and sign up. It's actually free for schools to be part of this program. And incidentally, it's funded by the savings. So the savings that we're achieving are funding this program. So it's completely sustainable on itself, which is we're really excited about. So yeah, thank you. My goal is really, I just want to be in every single school in Victoria and then Australia and then the world, but that's another story. So before we were at 700 million litres of water. We're now sitting at 1.2 billion litres of water saved. And it's probably gone up in the last week or so since we submitted this presentation. That's money for the Education Department to spend on other things, and that's also what we're really, really pleased about. So in terms of what's next, as I said, program extension, so potentially funding it, being funded to be able to be in more schools, that's numero uno. The second is potentially being able to take the program into other industries, so high water usage industries like mining, and I was talking before about electricity. You may have seen that on the secondary students have got that information that they can access. That's because at about the start of last year, the Department of Education funded a pilot study across 100 of the schools to take electricity data. Because we'd already built the APIs, it was actually quite easy for us to flow that into the system. So they started to be able to measure and make savings on their electricity data as well. So we're looking to be able to extend the electricity component of the platform out to the other 1,400 schools. That's kind of it, really. But I guess what I did want to say was that the reason for doing this case study and having a bit of a focus around the creativity, the look and feel, the organic, illustrative approach, and potentially changing the shift in the sense of what we got given as a problem originally was actually about saying we're going to bring data online for facility managers to look at. And when we changed the conversation to say, how can we actually make this bigger and better, that changed the conversation. It changed the creative direction. and at the end of the day, it's delivered these results. So in terms of having a bit of ammo up your sleeve for when you want to be talking about design and how important design and creativity are in the execution of digital projects, I really hope that this can be something that you guys have in your back pocket to use. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Zoe. Wow, what a success story. Oh, it's so great to see that. And thank you for sharing that story with us. I've got a lot of people asking how they can get SWEP in their homes now on Twitter. So is that coming? Is that a thing?
No, but that's a great idea. Yeah, we can have a chat about that. Hit me up on Twitter.
If any of you guys have questions, just feel free to tweet at PausePure, and I'll be following those throughout the sessions here today. But a lot of us are. There's a lot of data out there, right? And there's a lot of different ways that we can cut it and look at it. How did you guys land on what was the right amount of data for what age group and for what user?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did a lot of workshops with teachers. That was the primary feeder into what would be appropriate and what to display. And then the conversation around how we could potentially extend that to some of the Bureau of Meteorology data, that would just sort of came out of it. Was one of those light bulb moments in a workshop. So we ran a series of workshops with the teachers and the facility managers as well to find out what they really needed. That was a really important discovery process.
Super, that's great. And are you doing other projects around data, around different things, or is this kind of the big one for you at this point?
We did do a project, we are working on other projects, but one of the other projects we had that had a lot of information and data in it, well, it was data that we then turned into information which was then used, was around the Flinders Street design competition. I'm not sure if any of you guys would have seen that around, that was about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago now. And we actually had to encourage the public to run and vote on a People's Choice Award, which was voting on criteria. It was very, very complicated, but basically because the government wanted to use it as a new way of engaging the community in a community consultation, and yet it wasn't allowed to be a situation where you looked at one of the designs, I think there were 6 designs, and said, oh, I like that one the best. They actually wanted more meaningful information from people. So they collected 24 votes, 24 points of that you could vote on. On the 6 finalists, you had 4 different criteria, and it wasn't considered a completed vote until the user had actually gone through all 24 points, so all 6 finalists and 4 criteria for each, and then submitted demographic information. That's when it was considered a completed vote. So we did a lot of work around designing the process to draw people through that, to keep them engaged and look at all of the different content that was on display from the architects that had been pulled from all around the world. They were just incredible submissions. And it's still live. I think if you go to voteflindersstreet.com, you can check out all of the work. But they were hoping for about 1,000 votes. That was going to give them some meaningful information to get some trends. And with the design that we achieved 18,974 votes. So they had a lot more information to work with, and they got some really great community engagement. So yeah, making data beautiful is sort of our thing. I think the design guys do a great job of that.
Super. We've also got 2 microphones here on the side, so if anybody in the audience has any questions, feel free to step down to one of those, and we can open up those questions for you guys. Let's see. Go for it.
Hi.
Hi.
The Department of Education is very forward in going backward. So how did you actually get them to come on board and to buy in on this?
Great question. It was actually originally started by the Department of Sustainability Environment, and I think Department of Education got involved when they could see the numbers. So we really did have numbers to back our activity in terms of expanding the program and what we wanted to do. At the same time, they were the ones that pushed it further into electricity because they had started to see the numbers and the savings that they were achieving out of water. So they were the ones that then funded the pilot program. So it's sort of been a bit of pollination across the departments in terms of who was funding it originally, but they got on board, which we're pretty happy about. And hopefully they'll definitely be on board moving forward as well. So numbers. They just want the numbers. They want the savings. They want that big orange slide up there with the millions of dollars of savings, really.
Cool. If there's any more questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Zoe, for sharing that story with us. And